Hey everybody on YouTube, Justin here for an exciting episode of Delve Too Deep, the series where I analyze the game and I sometimes just go a bit too deep. But luckily, today, we're not going to be going that crazy because we're just kind of looking at this card from the Edge of the Earth expansion, Protective Gear. And I was just curious every time this card comes up. Honestly, I'm kind of just curious what exactly does this card protect me from? Because it's protective gear, its job do be protect while I attack, so I'm just kind of curious what exactly that would be. So if you don't know what protective gear does, it's the card on the left, 4 cost, 2 experience. It's part of the Guardian and the Survivor class. Soaks for 3 damage and 3 horror, so already it's pretty good soak. As a reaction, when you draw a hazard treachery, deal 1 damage and 1 horror to protective gear. Cancel that card's revelation effect. So whenever Travis, Brent, and I talk about this card, it always brings up the point that it's pretty reliable soak all in of itself. 2 experience, 4 cost, which is pretty high, but the question is, like, it's the body slot. Is it really, like, it's not that competitive of a slot? If you need soak, it probably does a pretty good job for you. But then with all this conversation, we're kind of just ignoring the ability, the reaction ability on the card, which cancels. It's like a ward of protection just for hazards, and it puts the damage on the protective gear. So the question I've always wondered is, what exactly does it protect us from? What are hazards in the game, and how relevant are they to this build? With the Guardian, you're probably wearing your protective gear if you're Tommy Muldoon to soak and then turn it into juicy 6 resources later on in the game. And you also are probably worried more about horror than you are about damage. So that's going to be like number 1. If this card stops, like, it soaks horror, but we're talking about all of this is just like the revelation effect. That's where I'm interested to cancel those. So we're looking if it cancels a revelation effect that deals horror, and if it's more than 1 horror, that's probably a win for protective gear. As well as that, if it stops an effect that hurts you beyond just damage and health, that also I'm going to consider to be a win for protective gear. So this is less breaking down exactly how many scenarios these cards are found in, because as you see, Grasping Hands appears in any ghoul set, so it's going to appear in Dream Eaters, it's going to appear, it appears all over the place, the ghoul set, and then there's also Crypt Chill as well, which we'll get to, which also appears all over the place. But let's go through these hazard treacheries. There's a bunch of them, so let's have a good time, and let's see exactly how good and how relevant stopping this effect is, assuming you just don't want to soak it. And as a survivor, it's a bit of a weird card for a survivor because, like, you're not really scared of the Mythos deck, and this further provides security for that. I personally, with my limited knowledge of protective gear, just reading it and like my knowledge of the game, that this reads more as a Guardian card than it does a Survivor card just upon first read. So let's see what goes on here. Grasping Hands is our first one here. It's test foot 3. For each point you fail by, take 1 damage. If you have bad foot, what's better than taking 3 damage? Canceling that card and taking a damage and a horror on protective gear. That seems like a pretty fine exchange. It's one thing that really shocked me with some of this while going through this is seeing exactly what hazards are. And one thing I should also say before I get any deeper, I imagine in the Edge of the Earth campaign, there is going to be a lot of hazards. There's going to be a good chunk of them. So, this is, of course, we don't, by the time this video is released, there has been no Edge of the Earth campaign spoilers, apart from like the pictures that came in the article, but I'm not squinting and reading that stuff. So this is just looking at all the way up to Innsmouth Conspiracy. Ignoring standalones and returns too, because I rarely play those as is. Next one here is Crypt Chill. This is a hazard. Test brain 4. If you fail, and choose and discard 1 asset you control. If you cannot, take 2 damage instead. So this is kind of nice over here because you can just stop that card, take a damage and a horror, and then your protective gear stays and sticks around. You might be asking, like, if, and like really, like it's going to come to points where your protective gear stops and dies at the same time as this crypt chill, and you effectively, yes, discarded an asset. But maybe you can take advantage of that in other ways. If you're Tommy Muldoon or if you're William York, you can play it from your discard pile. Albeit William York and Crypt Chill aren't really, they're not really enemies. They're kind of like friends sometimes. But protective gear can basically just say no. It's basically like, protective gear is like, Crypt Chill needs 3, you need to draw 3 Crypt Chills to get through a protective gear, so it effectively eats 3 of them from the Mythos deck, and you're not going to see that many in a normal scenario, so having that is nice. It's nice if you're worried about that. If you have assets that are relevant, protective gear will stop that in a way that now 1 Crypt Chill is literally just 1/3 of your protective gear. Seems good. Obscuring Fog. No, you're never hazarding this. You're never protective gearing this away. Whenever you draw Obscuring Fog, all that happens is you just let out a little audible nice. I didn't draw a Mythos card. There's nothing to worry about. This one is not worth being protected by your protective gear. So no, this one's not relevant to protective gear. But so far, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Okay. Now we're into the Dunwich Legacy. These ones are specific to the certain scenarios. So this one is only for the Essex County Express. Revelation. Each investigator location loses 1 action. Each investigator location with 4 or more damage must also discard an asset he or she controls. So Essex County Express is going to be your 4th scenario in the Dunwich Legacy, which means that protective gear probably isn't on your radar early on, especially in Dunwich when it's lower. However, I think this card is really good to stop with protective gear. It gives every player an action, so if you're playing with 2 other people, that's now 3 actions at the cost of this. Excuse me. And then it also, if anyone has 4 or more damage, they don't have to discard an asset. That seems pretty sick. I think this one's very relevant with protective gear. Yeah. I think this one's good. This one's very nice to cancel with protective gear. Ruin and Destruction. So this one is from Undimensioned and Unseen. At this point, you probably, if you're looking at protective gear, this is scenario 6, you probably have your protective gear in your deck. Unless, of course, you're buying protective gear to... This goes back to the conversation of protective gear. If you're looking to put protective gear to protect you from dying, I do think unless you're... I mean, if you're in Survivor... You have Pete Sylvester to not die. Or Madame LeBranche. She's a soak, incredible horror soak for 2, right? Like, you just don't need protective gear. So, like, this is coming down to the Guardians. And if you're worried about horror, like, Elder Sign Amulet just, I think, is a better job. It's more experience, yes, but it's cheaper and it takes up a relic slot, which isn't like... Or the accessory slot, which isn't like... I mean, it can be relevant. Like, there's more like now, especially with Holy Rosary 2, right? But I think just 4 is a lot. 4 resources is a lot. This is why, like, I am looking at this card with what is exactly does it stop? Because I think it's incredibly relevant for when you're making these decisions of when you put this in. So, like, I can see this as going back to Tommy Muldoon and Will York. I think they have a good home in those decks. I don't know. Let's just keep going. I keep getting lost in the sauce that is protective gear. So, scenario 6, Undimensioned and Unseen, you probably have it at this point. If you're going to be putting this in your deck. Unless you're putting it in for Soak, in which case, going back, I think there's better options. Maybe. Who knows? I haven't put this card into... Back in the sauce again. I keep getting lost in it. Alright. Ruin and Destruction. Revelation. If there are no investigators at the same location as Brood of Yog-Sothoth, Ruin or Destruction gains Surge. Otherwise, each investigator at the same location as Brood of Yog-Sothoth tests foot 3. For each point he or she fails by, he or she takes 1 damage. Yeah. So one thing that's neat is that this one isn't like Ward of Protection where the card, it cancels. It's like Ward of Protection like in the sense that, and also like this one, this card doesn't have Surge printed, It has Surge through its Revelation effect, so this would stop Surge if there were no Brood of Yog-Sothoth at the same location as an investigator. And honestly, I mean, like, this is basically just a complicated party suffers grasping hands. And I think at this point, is it scenario 6? I think that overall, yeah, I would probably, like, with all of these, I'm kind of like approaching the logic, like, if I drew this card and I had protective gear in play, would I use it? And I think at this point, I would use it. If it triggers, I stop some people from taking a grasping hands, right? So I could potentially stop up to player count grasping hands from triggering. And if it doesn't trigger, I didn't draw a treachery, like a Mythos card this turn. And I think that's a pretty good deal. I think I would use this with protective gear. Yeah, I think this one's pretty all right. I think this one's good, actually. I think it's very good for that. Spaces between. So this is where Doom awaits. So this is scenario 7. Flip each non-Sentinel Hill location in play to its unrevealed side, removing all clues from it. Each investigator and enemy at a location flipped in this way immediately moves to the nearest Sentinel Hill location. Shuffle each non-Sentinel Hill location so the players do not know which is which. Probably 8 out of 10 times. So 2 out of 5 times. So 40% of the time. Actually, you know what? We're gonna go 9 out of 10 times. 9 out of 10 times. I probably won't use protective gear on this one. I think this one's usually a pretty soft location. So I'm gonna just sit it as it is. I'm gonna say no. I don't think this one's protective gear is too worried about this one. But honestly, if you draw this one, most of the time you're not too worried about it either. Vortex of Time. Still in where Doom awaits. Each investigator at a Sentinel Hill location tests Brain 4. Each investigator who fails takes 2 damage. I'd cancel this one. Like, unless no one's affected by it or only the Mystic is affected by it, I would just get rid of it. And the reasoning is, well, number 1, each investigator. So if I save the day for even somebody, they're going to really like me. They're going to be like, hey, thanks, Justin. That's really cool. And number 2, going back to what I said earlier, this stops 2 damage. And 2 is greater than 1 damage that would be put on the protective gear, because if I'm playing this as Soak, I would rather just use its effect and soak less. You're taking the horror, but I think I would. I think with this one, I would snap this one off pretty quick. Just going with the simple 2 is greater than 1 for damage. Like you could say, well, Justin, you could put 1 on the protective gear and 1 on yourself. But if I'm gonna put damage on the protective gear from a hazard that caused me that damage, I might as well just cancel it. Of course, I wouldn't if no one was affected, but that's kind of just like obvious. That's obvious. All right, Lost in Time and Space. So this is in the last scenario, so if protective gear was going to be in your plan, it's going to be in your deck at this point. Revelation. If you're at an extra-dimensional location, discard it and take 1 damage. Otherwise, take 2 damage. This is an easy cancel. Easy. This one's protective gear is very good at stopping you from collapsing reality. How protective gear can do that, only Yog-Sothoth knows, but hey, I'd cancel this one in a heartbeat. The discarding extra-dimensional locations also deals you horror, so just being like, no, thank you, is nice. Is good. It's very good. Wormhole. Discard cards from the top of the encounter deck until location discarded. Resolve that location's revelation ability, then move to that location. I think this one is nice. This one you'll cancel it more than you think, because normally this one's pretty soft, but it can really ruin your game plan depending on when you draw it. And just being able to say no is good. It doesn't even exhaust. So we've had Surge. I'm very interested to see how this one works in Edge of the Earth, but I think I would cancel Wormhole a non-zero number of times, more than the one I talked about earlier. This one. Yeah, this one. This one is like, this one I said like 1 out of 10 times. It's realistically like 1 out of 20. Wormhole is probably like, it's like higher up there. Maybe 3 out of 10 times, it's just a no thank you. I wish I didn't draw this. Okay, Path to Carcosa time. This one is Tough Crowd. Put Tough Crowd into play next to the agenda deck. Each investigator must spend 1 additional action to parlay. At the end of the round, discard it. No, I don't think this one's that spooky. I think it can sometimes slow you down, but then if there's a turn where like you have to like parlay less, you can set the game up, you can kill enemies, and sometimes you just draw it and you're like, it's not a problem, we'll just wait around. If it is a problem, you'd know and you'd use protective gear for it. Of note, this is the second scenario though. I don't know, I think this is specifically the Last King, so it wouldn't really... Having protective gear at this point is probably not a thing, if I had to wager. So I think this one's just this one basically shouldn't even be in the slideshow. But it is because we're delving too deep, we're looking at all of them. Ooze and Filth. Put Ooze and Filth into play next to the agenda deck. Each location gets +1 Shroud. At the end of the round, discard Ooze and Filth. So this appears in The Last King and Unspeakable Oath, as far as I can remember those two. And both of them have that synergy where certain things are harder if shrouds are higher. But I think this one is also just a solid no. I'll probably just let this one go. I can't imagine ever using protective gear on this one. So right now, for those keeping score at home, Dunwich, pretty good for protective gear. I'd say above average. I mean, I actually can't say above average because I don't even know what the average is yet. I'd say it's pretty good there. And in Path to Carcosa right now, we're looking at a thumbs down. Corrosion. Hey, it's the other one. Discard item assets from play and or hand with a total printing cost of a resource cost of at least X, where X is the shroud value for location. If no cards are discarded by this effect, Corrosion gains Surge. Yeah, this one I'd cancel. This one is... So Corrosion is the bad side of Ooze and Filth. So like Ooze and Filth is like a 1-2 punch into Corrosion. Put the Shroud higher, they have to discard more cards. And Protective Gear is probably going to get discarded if it didn't have its effect printed on it. So just saying no to this card. I think this is our first yes, I would use this one in Carcosa most of the time, if not all the time. Unless I wouldn't discard anything. But even then it gains Surge. And like just being able to not draw an encounter card at the cost of Protective Gear, I think is worth it. So saying no card. I just didn't draw a card this turn, and my Protective Gear took 1/3 of its damage in horror. Yeah, seems fine. All right, this one is the Pallid Mask, the Pit Below. Revelation. Attach your location. If there's no copy of the Pit Below attached, if there is, discard the Pit Below and it gains Surged. Attached location gets +1 Shroud. And in the round, each investigator attached location takes 3 damage. Yeah, this one can really throw a wrench in things. It can really like just change the game completely in the Pallid Mask, and being able to cancel this is really nice. I don't think I would. I kind of might. If I draw and it would gain the Surge because there's already Pit Below there, because the way the Pit Below gets you is if you have your situation and then someone draws a Pit Below, someone draws an enemy, someone else draws an enemy, or like a dude explodes and there's now this scary enemy showing up or walking towards you, and you basically just get like action crunched, right? Like and being able to basically just be like, someone drew a Pit Below and now we don't need to worry about another card and we can adapt to this new situation we have, could be pretty strong with Protective Gear. Protective Gear also has an additional effect where you can just take the 3 damage and your Protective Gear can just go. Like, let's say, for example, you've been using it to soak horror and it has 2 horror on it and no damage. You could just stay in the location, fall in the pit, take the 3 damage, put it on your Protective Gear, and you effectively have nullified that card for you, which I think is kind of neat and I think is very relevant. I think it is relevant if you're going for the soak approach or you've just seen no hazards and just been taking yeah, I think this one's yes. All right, that's it for Carcosa. I do think that Carcosa was worse than Dunwich, but we got some better ones later on. Okay, so we got snake bites. So we're in the Forgotten Age now. Now, this one I don't know where it shows up. I know it's in the first scenario. Let me see if I can quickly just pull it up, because I should. Give me a second. Let me go to ArkhamDB. And let me go to cards. And actually, let me just search snake. Oh, I have snake bite saved. Let me search snake bite in that case, because that's the specific card we're looking at. Serpents 5/7. Okay. So then if I go, now I'm going to search by set, which if I do, don't know that. But okay, so this one shows up in, if I'm going to wager, it's also going to show up in Heart of the Wilds, if I had to guess. So, test foot 3. If you fail, you must either choose one, deal 5 damage to an ally ass you control, or take 1 direct damage. If you're not poisoned, become poisoned. Yes, always, 100%. Jam, 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 jam. This card sucks. So much to the point where Bryn, especially, he just plans to have allies to die in the Untamed Wilds. He just wants them there to get bit so he doesn't get poisoned, because being poisoned sucks. It's unlikely you're going to have this in scenario 1, apart from, I mean, you could now with the take trauma and get 3 experience. So there's now that. You could just have protective gear to start. Would I do that to stop snakebite? No, because I also am not too hyped up by that neutral give experience card. And I would just, honestly, don't tell anyone else. I'm not too scared of getting poisoned anymore. It's not too bad. I've been poisoned a bunch in the Forgotten Age, and to me, it doesn't really increase the difficulty too much on my end. But if you are scared of being poisoned, protective gear is great at stopping it, especially when it comes to the Heart of the Elders. That's what I meant to say when I think I said something earlier. Heart of the Elders it stops that one. Yeah, I think this one's very good at being protected. Protect us from the snake bite, please. Deep Dark. Put into play next to the agenda deck. No more than 1 clue may be discovered from each location by each investigator each round. At the end of the round, discard 1 copy of Deep Dark from play. I probably would never cancel this unless it's going to cause us to lose the game. And honestly, if Deep Dark's going to cause you to lose the game, you're having a bad game. I'm going to just say that. Yeah, I think there are times where sometimes you get unlucky, you draw a Deep Dark, or you draw like a second Deep Dark. You could stop, like the second one's nice to stop, like 2 turns with this is kind of annoying. But Deep Dark's kind of more of an annoyance than it is like an actual problem. The majority of the time, I imagine there are cases, I've probably even lived them and I forgot, where it's caused us to lose or fall behind. But I don't think this one's worth stopping with protective gear. And if I drew it, I'd be like, I didn't draw a Mythos card this turn. Poisonous Spores. Attach your location. At the end of the round, each investigator at the attached location who is poisoned takes 2 horror. Each investigator at the attached location who is not poisoned must put the set-aside poisoned weakness into play in his or her threat area instead, and then discard Poisonous Spores. Like the hole in the Pallid Mask, I would cancel this pretty much all the time. I could not, unless there was a situation where we were all walking out of that location, just saying no to the poisonous mushrooms by, picking them up, putting them somewhere else. Yeah, I think this one's an easy cancel. Easy cancel 9 out of 10 times. Boom. This one's honestly, Forgotten Age seems really good with protective gear so far. And I know I'm saying that with just like 1 card I said yes to, 1 card I said no to, and 1 card I'd say yes to. And Poisonous Spores can really ruin your day. Frickin' ants. Test foot 4. For each point you fail by, discard a random card from your hand or choose and discard a card from your play area. Dude, this is an easy no. This is an easy say, hey, I'm not going to draw this card. So I suppose when I said it's an easy no, it's an easy yes. Yes, I would stop this card with protective gear. Yeah, this one is a worse Crypt Chill. Yeah, it's that easy. It can really ruin you, and just saying no to the card at the cost of protective gear seems like a good deal. Forgotten Age right now, so far, I think is the best for protective gear. Cool. See, we're learning new things. We're learning new things. No turning back. Attach no turning back to your location or connecting location. Limit 1 per location. Investigators cannot enter or leave attached location. As an action, you can test Fist 3 or check your supplies. If you succeed, or if you have a pickaxe, discard no turning back. Any investigator or connecting location may activate this ability. So, this brings up the point as the Guardian. Your fist is probably high enough to break through. If someone has the pickaxe, this is a lot less of a problem. But there will be times when you're swamped with enemies and you don't have the action, or you don't have a pickaxe, or no one with a pickaxe is close, or they've already resigned, or in the case of our recent Return to Forgotten Age, someone with our tools left the campaign because Kelvin got sick of being stuck in the jungle. So I think this one is not an automatic yes, but I do think that it is a very, like, tentative nod. Like, yeah, I could see myself canceling this one with the protective gear. And honestly, like, a tentative nod is pretty much kind of like a point for protective gear. Because the thing about protective gear is it's just take damage and horror on your protective gear, cancel a revelation effect, you didn't draw a Mythos card for the turn, which we already know is really powerful. And then how many hazards are you going to see, right? So, like, I feel like unless you draw something like Ooze and Filth, you're going to cancel a protective gear because that's why you played it, unless you're desperately needing the soak. And I just think, once again, going back to my point, I think there's just better things to soak for you. And then also just, like, if it's canceling damage or a test in the Mythos card, it's effectively still soak. As you can see, I'm very conflicted on this freaking protective gear card, and this deep dive for me has been very helpful for me to see the thing of it, because I look at the text before I look at the soak. I think the text is the more important part of the card, because not drawing a Mythos card is effectively, to me, is better than using this for the damage. And I'm just, I don't know. I'm still stuck in the sauce, man. Okay. Creeping Darkness. Attached to the Nexus of Nakai. So this is Shattered Aeons. Place 1 Doom on Creeping Darkness. Formless Spawn gets plus player health. Double action, test Brain 3, or check your supplies. If you succeed, or if you have the torches, discard Creeping Shadows. I mean, you're effectively canceling Ancient Evils in a way with this card. So yes, I would. Not even thinking about it. This one's a goodbye. Because also Shattered Aeons is a very action-intensive campaign scenario. So you don't even, like, as soon as this is drawn, you're like, I guess we just lost a turn. So being able to say no to that is a win. And also there's fire in the art, and there's fire in that art, so that's true synergy. All right, we're on to Dream Eaters. There are no hazards in the Circle Undone, which makes sense. It's more of a magic themed. So there's nothing to stop there. So protective gear and Circle Undone. If you're looking at it for beyond soak, no thank you. There might be some ghouls, some crypt chills and stuff like that, but I think overall there's better options for the Circle Undone. I still think right now Forgotten Age number 1, Dunwich number 2, Carcosa number 3, Circle Undone, easy number 4. Outbreak. This is part of the second scenario, Waking Nightmare? I don't know the names of those ones. They haven't been built into my brain yet. Outbreak. Revelation. Perform an infestation test. If you are in an infested location, treat each tablet as if it was revealed as a skull. So this would make spiders appear. Normally you're pretty prepared for spiders. If you're overwhelmed, I can see you canceling this. This would be your first scenario, so you would need to buy the neutral thing or have another way to gain experience at the beginning. I probably would, though. It's a hazard, and going with my theory, it's the first scenario. Waking Nightmare is not too difficult of a scenario, so it's not like it's spooky scary to see this. But I probably still would, just to get value out of my protective gear, beyond just soak. Because going back to the sauce that I'm stuck in, I think this card is better than just the soak it provides. Zoog Burrow. Zoogs. So Zoogs show up a few times. Revelation test foot 3. For each point you fail by, add 1 swarm card to the nearest Zoog, swarming Zoog enemy. If you fail and there are no such enemies in play, search the encounter deck and discard a pile for a Zoog enemy, draw it, and shuffle the encounter deck. Yeah, I'd cancel this. I'd cancel this one because if I fail by 3, I've effectively added 3 enemies to the board, and assuming that I was going to fail by 3 and I just canceled it, I effectively just defeated 3 enemies. That's math, baby. Yeah, I think this one's an easy cancel. Can't think much more about it. Even if I would add a Zug enemy, like if there's no Zug enemies at play, still cancel it. I effectively killed an enemy. That's called being a guardian. Taste of Lifeblood. Revelation. I don't know, is this one from... This one's probably from Point of No Return. I think that's the one with the Ghoul Squad. Test Brain 3. For each point you fail by, you must choose 1. Place 1 of your clues in your location, or place 1 of your clues on the nearest enemy, or take 1 damage. So you could fail by more than 1, which to me is a yes for protective gear. Going back to the theory, what's better than taking 1 damage on protective gear, 1 damage on yourself, and 1 damage on another ally? Just don't. Just say no, thank you. Now, of course, you might say, but Justin, there's this case and this case and this case and this case where you might want to do that. Yes, there's a million cases in Arkham Horror, the card game, where everything changes. I'm looking at this as just the basic of protective gear, and I think I would cancel this one because it deals you damage. If you have clues, place them on the nearest enemy. I don't think it's a bad thing. You just kill it. I think this one's not a sure thing as like I would just get this one off. Like this one's an easy yes. This one's I'd look at the board state and see. So this one's a maybe. Lit by Deathfire. Okay, so this is Point of No Return, I believe. Revelation. Each investigator loses 1 resource. Each investigator at Veil or Depths location chooses and discards 1 card from their hand, and each investigator at Depths location loses 1 action. I think if it was just the first one, I wouldn't cancel this. But as soon as anyone is in a Veil or Depths location, I would trigger this. Easy. Boom. You're welcome, Travis and Bryn. I just stopped you guys from discarding a card and losing an action. I'm a hero, literally. Yeah, this one's easy. Easy yes. Dole Tunnel. If Slithering Dole is in play... Dole's his own set, huh? If Slithering Dole is in play, it moves and attacks as if it were the enemy phase. Otherwise, attach Dole Tunnel to a location with at least 2 connections away from the nearest Dole Tunnel. Then if Slithering Dole is in the victory display, spawn it at attached location exhausted. Yeah. Stop that one. Do you know what's better than a Dole showing up? A Dole not showing up. Man, I'm pretty much just a soundboard. I press a button and I say, do you know what's better than X? Y. But Y is just a slight change on X. Caught in a Web. So this one is, I think this is part of the final scenario with, don't know the name of it. I need to know the name of it. Weaver of the Cosmos. I think it's that one. Yes, okay. Could put Caught in the Web into play in your threat area. You get -1 foot and cannot take more than 1 move action each round. Test Fist 3. If you succeed, discard Caught in a Web. Okay, so this one's a little bit... this one goes back to that Guardian thing, where your fist is probably high enough that breaking through this isn't a problem. So most of the time, because you can't stop someone else's... if you have the actions to spare, you'd probably just take this one. If you don't have the actions to spare, this one's an easy cancel. So I think this one overall is a thumbs up in favor of protective gear. All right. Okay. We are now in Innsmouth Conspiracy. This one is I have the least knowledge of for the scenarios and the game, so I am not going to be able to go into like a big exploration of them like the other ones. So let's just look at the card at face value. Revelation. If your location is unflooded, Undertow gains Surge. Otherwise, put it into play in your threat area. After you move, take 2 damage and 2 horror, discard Undertow. Oh yeah, no, I'll stop this. I'll stop this. As a lightning bolt, you can discard a card from your hand, test Fist 3 or Foot 3 to fight the Pull of the Tides. If you succeed, discard Undertow. Yeah. I think if this card gains Surge, I'd probably let it slide. Yeah. Depends on the situation, once again, the board state. Because if I had other things to deal with, I would just say, hey, I don't want to draw a treachery card a mythos card this turn. But if my location is flooded, oh, you can be rest assured that it's going to the frickin' bin, and my protective gear is taking a damage and a horror. That's it. This card, Undertow, can be really bad. I have soaked it a bit, though. When I was Silas, I've taken that 2 damage and 2 horror. That was that was a tough decision, but we just took it. And not doing that would have been a lot nicer. Okay. Rising Tides. Increase the flood level of the nearest location that can have its flood level increased. If no location's flood level is increased by this effect, it gains Surge. I think this one is entirely dependent on board state. If this would cause you to take 5 direct damage, then yeah, I would probably cancel this one. If this would cause one of your teammates to take 5 direct damage, then yeah, I'd probably cancel this one. If this one changes a nearby location or your location up 1 level, but you can just walk out of it, I would just let it happen. So I think this one is situational, but overall, we're going right down the middle for protective gear on this one. Riptide. If your location is unflooded, Riptide gains Surge. Otherwise, test foot 3, 4 instead of your location is fully flooded. If you fail, choose to discard 1 asset you control. If you cannot, lose 1 resource for each point you fail by. Yeah, I'd stop it. It's a Crypt Chill. It's a Crypt Chill that if you only have once again, if I had like an empty gun, like this even goes to Crypt Chill or the other Ants. I mean, Ants kind of scatters a bit, but if you have an asset that you can be discarded, I'm obviously not going to use protective gear, but assuming that I have stuff I want to keep, this is an easy, I'd press the protective gear button and be protected from the Riptide. Okay, easy. So far, I think protective gear is, I'd say Innsmouth is kind of, is up there. It's not Carcosa. I'd say it's better than Dream Eaters. I think it's better than Dream Eaters. Is it better than Dunwich? Let's see what else. There's still a few more to come. Fog over Innsmouth. Revelation, test brain 3. If you succeeded, you take 1 horror or put Fog over Innsmouth into play next to the agenda deck. If you failed, do both. Each location gets +1 Shroud. Then the round, discard it. Okay, this one's interesting. This one's interesting. If your brain is somewhat okay, these cards are a bit tricky because they have the, if you succeed, do a bad thing, which is not normal. I know we mucked these up the first time, and I'll guarantee we aren't the only ones. But putting it in play next to the agenda deck is pretty easy. If you're going to take a horror anyway because your brain's bad, maybe you just I just don't think this one's worth canceling because it doesn't beat my 1 is greater than 2 rule. Because really in this one, or sorry, my 2 is greater than 1 rule. I can do math. With this one, you stop 1 horror. However, you're also taking 1 damage, and you're also really not stopping the horror, right? Because the numbers are lower, right? So yeah, this one, no, don't cancel this one. This one's bad to cancel. Maybe if the location Shroud are being high, but as we saw, Ooze and Filth isn't really a problem. Inundated. Place 1 barrier between this location and each connecting location with no barriers between them. If no barriers are placed by this effect, it gains Surge. Yeah. I think this one's entirely board dependent, so it's going to be kind of like this. Maybe favoring this, but also could be favoring that, because once again, it's board dependent, so we're just going to put it right in the middle with that one. Fun scenario, though, in Too Deep. Bumpy Ride, let's go. Oh my god, look at that hand coming in. If you are not in a vehicle, test foot 5. If you fail, take 3 damage. If you are in a vehicle, the vehicle drivers test foot 3. If the driver fails, each investigator in your vehicle takes 2 damage. Hey, remember that thing I just said about Fog over Innsmouth? How the math didn't check out? Guess what? The math checks out on this one. This also can cancel an effect that your driver might take, who might not be good at driving because everyone has low foot. I think this one is an easy cancel most, if not all, of the time. Because the math checks out. Ooh, all right. This is another one from Horror and High Gear, which means that I think Innsmouth's probably pretty good. I think it's pretty good for protective gear. We got another thumbs up from this one. I think the only ones it's like not great in are Carcosa and then obviously Circle Undone. I can't see. Oh, frick. Revelation. If you're not in a vehicle, test brain 5. If you fail, take 3 horror. In a vehicle, the vehicle's driver tests brain 3. If they fail, each investigator in your vehicle takes 2 horror. Hey, as Bryn says, like, second verse, same as the first. Yes, cancel this one because, once again, the math checks out. Eyes in the trees. Is this 3 for horror and high gear? Let's go. Let's freaking go, Fireman. You've made it. Fireman Fred. Revelation. Test brain 4. If you fail, you must either discard an asset you control or discard 1 card from your hand for each point you failed by. If you fail and you're in a vehicle, each other investigator in your vehicle must also resolve this effect as if they had just failed. Press the button. I would like to not draw this card, please, because it affects multiple players, and if I have stopped that from happening and my brain is not high, I'm going to press the button on this one 9 out of 10 times, baby. Let's go. Horror and high gear. Great for being a firefighter in protective gear or just a regular person in protective gear as well. Kiss of Brine. Oh, that's some spicy art, isn't it? Revelation. Test Fist 2. All right, Fist, relevant. Increase the difficulty of this test by 2 if you're at a flooded location. If you fail, take 1 damage and put Kiss of Brine into play in your threat area. You cannot gain resources or draw cards. At the end of the enemy phase, discard it. 1 damage is not greater than 1 damage and 1 horror. And gaining resources or drawing cards isn't really too, like, it can be bad, but it's not really that bad. This one I don't cancel. I don't cancel this one, I just let it go. And I also have High Fist because I'm a guardian wearing this probably. And maybe I'm a survivor wearing it because I'm feeling a little bit spicy and having a good time. Maybe I'm Daniela. Daniela's going to play this card and I think it's going to be good in her. She's probably playing it for the soak as well. All right, this is the Lair of Dagon. Fulfill the oaths. If it's Act 1, test foot 3. If it's Act 2, test foot 3 and fist 2. If it's Act 2, foot 3 and fist 2. If it's Act 3, test foot 3, fist 2, book 2. For each of these skill tests you fail, take 1 damage. This one's interesting. I think it depends entirely on your stats, obviously. Whoa, Justin, what a crazy statement. I can't believe you have a channel on the internet talking about Arkham Horror, the card game. But I think as well, if you're worried about failing 2 of them, just press the button. If the tokens are bad, I don't know what the modifiers of the symbol tokens are in Lair of Dagon. If they're bad, press the button. Yeah, I think you just press the button. I think this one's if you're on, like, as soon as it's Act 2 and you're testing 2 skills, consider pressing the button. Because once again, you're now not drawing a Mythos card for the turn, essentially. Yep. I think this one's still like, it's not like a full thumbs up, but we're on like a 45-degree angle. My girlfriend found a witch store and she's in it. So I guess I'm going to be turned into a cat soon or something. All right, I think this is our last card, Treacherous Depths, Peril. Revelation, you must either choose one, and this is from Into the Maelstrom. Increase the flood level of your current location. Discard assets from play with a total cost of X, of at least X, where X is your location's shroud value. Hey, it's Corrosive Filth or whatever that own card was. Corrosion? I think it's just Corrosion. I'd cancel this one most of the time. Once again, if I had an asset, the flood location is a little bit more relevant in Into the Maelstrom. But I think this one would probably get a cancel most of the time. So I think Innsmouth's pretty good for protective gear. I think it's kind of like, it's probably realistically on par with, maybe a bit below Forgotten Age. A bit on par, if not above, Dunwich. Cool. Honestly, that was very helpful for me. I can now kind of see what hazards are there, what this stops, and of course this is going to just This egg is going to just crack wide open once we get to Edge of the Earth, because snow is a hazard. Avalanches are a hazard. Blizzard is a hazard. Ice, frostbite, hazard, hazard, hazard. Protective gear is obviously here for that campaign, and it's just going to be better because of that. Do I think protective gear is a good card? Yeah. I think it is a good card. Do I have a home for it yet? No, I'm still kind of lost in the sauce. Because I'm stuck. I'm stuck at that crossroads of what exactly the card is to me. And I think the true answer is, why not both meme, right? Because it exists both as soak and in its text. But I think my point is true, that if you're not just canceling a hazard card unless it's Ooze and Filth or Obscuring Fog, it's not, you should be canceling hazards that you draw unless there's something like Obscuring Fog, because you're effectively not drawing a Mythos card. And even if it only would like take a damage in a horror, or even just one it's tricky. I'm interested to play with it and then put it into practice and see how it works for me. Then again, I'm not scared of dying in this game, especially as a survivor. So I'd play this only as a guardian. I'm curious. I'd love to know, chat and viewers on YouTube, what you think about protective gear, because honestly, I'm having a hard, as you can see, I'm kind of still just trying to figure out exactly how it fits in and when I would play it in a deck. I'd probably consider it Forgotten Age and Innsmouth, and once again, it's going to be very good, and I'm probably going to play it in Daniela when we play Edge of the Earth. So sick. All right. Oh my god, I'm not on this screen. All right, pretend I'm here. Pretend I'm here. Oh, hello, everybody. That's me. I'm Justin. I'm having a good time. Hey, here I am. I found me. How's it going? I just want to say a huge thank you for watching. This was, once again, just kind of like a solo monologue discussion video. Delve Too Deep exists for me to do these kind of things that I would do for the game normally quietly by myself in a room, but hey, I've become a master at talking for 45 minutes about Arkham Horror the card game, so why not make a video about it? And I'd love to know what you guys think about protective gear, about the hazards that exist. How strong do you think it's going to be in Edge of the Earth once we start getting cold and snowy? Just let me know. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one. And as always, GG's.